Hi, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I'm calling miscellaneous punctuation. Miscellaneous punctuation means just a mixed bag of punctuation marks. This is not all of the punctuation in the English language. Obviously, I didn't put periods or commas or exclamation points, but these are punctuation marks that you need to know. The first one I have on this list is a semicolon. It looks like this. A semicolon is used to indicate a stronger pause than a comma. It is most often used to join two closely related sentences. Normally we use it instead of the word and. The second sentence has to, in some way, logically follow the first one. I think I will bring chocolate ice cream. It has always been a favorite. Okay, so we could use that instead of the word and. We could use that instead of the word because. It just acts like a kind of adhesive to join the two independent clauses. I want to discuss for just a moment a couple of mistakes that people normally make here. One of them is that they use a comma instead of a semicolon, and that's kind of like trying to stick two blocks of wood together with masking tape. It's not going to stay. It's not strong enough. What we need is something stronger, and a semicolon is stronger. Another mistake that people often make is that they leave out the word it, or whatever subject goes at the beginning of the second sentence. And so what we end up having there is an incomplete sentence on the second part. I read it like this. I think I will bring chocolate ice cream has always been a favorite. Maybe that works. I think it does work in Spanish, but in English we have to have, for each verb, we have to have a subject for each verb that acts like a verb. Then a semicolon may also be used to connect groups of words that already have a comma. So here I have three pairs of city, country, and when we put city and country next to each other, we have a comma between those. Here's the sentence. I've never been to Istanbul, Turkey, Rome, Italy, or Kiev, Ukraine. Kiev, Ukraine. Didn't say that right. Anyway, but if I were to put commas between each one of these things, it would look like 6 separate places. And it's not what it is. It's actually 3 pairs of places. So to make that very clear, instead of putting a comma between each pair, we put semicolons between each pair. The next thing is a colon. It looks a lot like a semicolon, except instead of the bottom having a comma, it has a period. A colon is used after an independent clause to introduce a list or another important element. For example, my favorite flavors are these: chocolate, pistachio, and cherry. So we have an independent clause. My favorite flavors are these. And maybe if I'm pointing at them, I don't need to list them. And that's a complete sentence. But I went ahead and listed these 3 flavors. Oh, I left out one important thing. Those are ice cream flavors. So you could also use a colon after the independent clause here to introduce the important point that I wanted to make, that those are ice cream flavors. And it could also be a word. I left out one important flavor, vanilla. Okay, so we could use a colon there. You could also, in the second sentence here and in the one I just said, you could also use a dash if you want to be more informal or more dramatic. And we're not talking about dashes today, though. Colons are not used between verbs and their complements. This is one of the mistakes that is often made by students in their writing. I brought chips, salsa, and Sprite. This is correct, but many students will put a colon after brought. And the problem is that brought needs a direct object. If you just say I brought, that doesn't make sense. So we need to say what we brought, okay? Here, she said it's time to go. And many students have been putting colons after the attribution, where it says she said, that's the attribution. And actually, what she said is, grammatically speaking, the direct object of the verb said. So she said what? She said it's time to go. And we do put a comma there. It's just traditionally done. We put a comma there. Quotation marks are used for titles of song. Okay, quotation marks here. Sorry, I bumped against the whiteboard there. It only erased the little part of this circle, though. Quotation marks. Quotation marks are used for titles of songs, articles, essays, short stories, and other short writings. Despacito, This I Believe, The Telltale Heart. Despacito, as you know, is a song, and I underlined it because it's in Spanish. And we'll get to italics and underlining at the bottom here. This, I believe, is the name of a very famous essay. If I have not had you write This I Believe yet, which I don't think I have, you will, if you stay at Licky Number and I stay at Licky Number, you will be writing a This I Believe essay. The Telltale Heart is many students' favorite short story. It's by Edgar Allan Poe, and yeah, and many students read it in 7th, 8th, or 9th grade. So, quotation marks are also used for dialogue or for quoting someone's exact words. So the first one is quoting someone's exact words. I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious. And that was said by Albert Einstein. By the way, when you give the name of someone in your writing for school or any other formal situation, do not use that person's first name. Use that person's last name if you're only going to use one name. There might be a few exceptions like Madonna or something, but for most people, it's going to be the person's last name. She said, "What a remarkable statement." Okay, so again, we have a quotation just like I had up here, and you can see that the quotation marks come right before and right after what the person said, but you have to put the punctuation that goes at the end of what they said inside the quotation marks. And there are more specific rules about that, and we'll get to those eventually, but just so you know for right now. And then finally, italics. Now, I tried my best to do some kind of silly calligraphy to show you what italics means. I think you know what italics means, but when we're handwriting, we normally do not use or try to use italics because one reason is because honestly, not everybody can do it. And so instead, we use underlining. And since I'm writing on the board here, I used underlining in my examples. Use italics or underlining if you're handwriting for non-English words. So if you're writing something in English for my class or for Miss Kirsten's class or whatever class, then in your sentence, when you get to a word that's not in English, even if it's Spanish, you should underline it if you're writing on paper or italicize it if you're typing. There are some exceptions to the rules. In English, we have adopted many words into our language, and so every time you use the word taco, for example, you don't have to underline it. Or karate, you don't have to underline it. But if it's something that's not commonly known or it's not commonly part of the English language, yes, underline it. In Russia, most families own dachas, or small farms. A dacha is a very, very small farm. Sometimes dachas are only as big as a room, and they just are a piece of land where they plant things, and it's very, very small. It's part of their culture. Most people have enough land where they can have a little cabin that can sleep like 2, 3, or 4 people, and an outdoor kitchen maybe, and little tiny, tiny plots where they can plant potatoes and onions and things like that. I could go into that because I'm extremely interested in Russian culture, but I need to get back to this. And also use italics for works of art and longer writings like books and movies. So if you're going to talk about the Mona Lisa, so you need to underline Mona Lisa. If you want to talk about the Nutcracker Suite, which is a long musical piece, then we need to underline that. Here's an example in a sentence. We read The Wizard of Oz that year and saw the movie too. So The Wizard of Oz is underlined. Sometimes we need to check and see whether the word "the" is part of the title or not. So we know whether to underline it or include it inside the quotation marks, like The Telltale Heart. Sometimes the word "the" is something that we say, like with The Iliad, is a famous literary work, but really the name of it is Iliad. It's in Latin. It doesn't have the word the in front of it. But when we talk about it in a sentence, we'll say, we studied the Iliad this year. but don't underline the. So you need to find out whether the word the is part of the work that you are talking about. Use italics to talk about words as words. So can you define the word superfluous? You can, in most cases, you can choose whether to use italics, underline, or put quotation marks around it, but you need to in some way indicate that it's not really grammatically, it's not really grammatically part of the sentence as, like, for example, superfluous is an adjective, and it's not acting like an adjective there. It's acting like an object complement, which is a noun. And that's because we're talking about it as a word. Okay? Also, technically, you're supposed to, if we're talking about a number as a number, then you're supposed to italicize the number. So if you're saying put a number 1 by the first thing, then you're talking about the number. So you would italicize the actual number 1. And we'll get into the specifics of all of this when we get into the book work and, of course, into your written assignment. So this is just basically sort of an introduction to what we're going to be talking about, and hopefully a refresher of things that you already know. Have a happy day.